kid, my mom sometimes she would drop me off at my grandmother's for the day, and if I'd act up, my grandmother would make me go out to the hedge and pick my switch. And if you're unfamiliar with my colloquialism there, what she meant is for me to go out and find the perfect stick for tanning my hide. Okay? And you had to do some serious inspecting of the size and width and flexibility of those switches in order to bring back the right one, because if you chose a wimpy stick, she'd run out and choose the most horrifying switch you could possibly imagine, and you didn't want that. That's right, Gamma didn't play. You see, the truth is, though, Gamma never had the heart to swing the switch hard enough to really hurt. But she knew, intensely contemplating the punishment by running my fingers over every branch and imagining how it would feel on my backside, was far worse than the whipping itself. Now, this concept is important for your successful long-term weight management plan as well. Though we look at weight management psychology from several different angles, the first concept I adopted in my journey involves such a basic universal truth that I thought it should also be the first piece of the puzzle that I lay on the table for you. But let me back up for just a second, because I only told you part of the story about my grandmother. You see, she was actually a wonderful, loving woman, and when I wasn't acting up, which wasn't as common as it should have been, she would lay the praise on me and make me these super fluffy cheese omelets that I have never been able to recreate. They were amazing. And homegrown tomato sandwiches for lunch. She'd feed my thirst for knowledge by taking me to museums and to the National Geographic lectures at Constitution Hall, which on a widowed retired English teacher's income wasn't easy, I'm sure. But she knew those rewards were also an incredibly strong influence. She knew what many of history's greatest success psychology teachers knew, that there are only two great motivating forces in the world. There's the carrot and the stick. Now, you may have heard this called a handful of different things, but the truth remains, regardless of how it's wrapped, we avoid things we think will cause us pain, and we gravitate towards things we think will bring us pleasure. That is, we are motivated to take action based on our fears and our desires. And that being said, we do all have different ideas about what we think will cause us pain or pleasure. And some of y'all might have a little bit twisted ideas on the subject. But the fact is, if we think or feel something is going to cause us pain, if we fear it, our natural inclination is to move away. And if we think or feel it will bring us pleasure, if we desire it, we gravitate towards it. And you can apply the carrot and the stick concept to anything your little heart desires, and always, without exception, trace the true motivation of any and every action or inaction you or anyone else has ever taken in the entire history of the world back to their desire to feel good or their desire to escape pain. Everything is motivated by the carrot and the stick, or some combination of the two. Now, I can hear it now, okay? But Denver, I sacrifice all my spare time to feeding the poor, which I would humbly ask how it makes you to feel to help so many. It either makes you feel good, or it helps you alleviate the sympathetic pains you feel when you see all those hungry people. It's nothing to be ashamed of. It is a beautiful thing, either way you slice it, but the truth is you'd never leave the comfort of your bed, put on your clothes, and schlep down to the church food bank or soup kitchen if there weren't carrots and sticks. If there weren't some motivation to get out of bed, you never would. It is a universal law of physics. A body at rest tends to stay at rest, and that rule doesn't just apply to heavenly bodies. It applies to human behavioral psychology. Okay, so why am I telling you all this when I'm just a regular guy that wants to help you learn long-term weight management skills? Well, for many of you, right now, I see you. Right now, some part of you, maybe even a big part of you, is just this second dying to get up from your computer or put down your phone and run to the comfort of a handful of little Debbies, even though they end up turning you into Big Debbie or Big Denver or Big Eric or Big Kathy. Some part of you is focused on the carrot of creamy satisfaction and is doing its best to ignore the stick of how out of breath you'll be from running to the kitchen, or how embarrassed you are to have your picture taken at this point in your life, or the pain in your back, or the pain in your feet, or how you avoid going to the beach, though you really love the water. But there are plenty of ways to make the carrot and the stick work in your favor. And in future videos and blog posts, I'll show you plenty of other ways I've turned my own psychology into the most powerful weight management tool I've ever come across that has allowed me to become over 100 pounds healthier, full of energy, and getting healthier by the day. But the very first thing you need to understand and take to heart is the power of the carrot and the stick, the motivating factors of fear and desire, pain and pleasure, and how to use those two diametrically opposed forces for your benefit instead of your detriment. Now again, we're not doctors, we're not psychologists, psychiatrists, nutritionists, or any kind of ist. I'm not an ist. We don't make claims we can't back up, and we certainly don't guarantee your weight loss success. What I can do is tell you what worked for me. So here are a couple of ways I learned to use carrots and sticks to my benefit. First off, I concentrated more on sticks than carrots. Why? Why would you concentrate more on the pain than the pleasure? Well, let me tell you. Because not only is the world filled with people with big dreams and no action, but the unfortunate truth is most people, including myself, will do far more to avoid what we fear than to attain what we desire. It's an unfortunate truth, but if I were hanging out at your place watching TV or playing video games, and I told you there was a guy on the corner that you could get $1 from just for asking, you may pause your show or put down the controller long enough to saunter down the street to get your free dollar. What the heck, it's a free dollar. But if I told you the guy who stole $1 out of your purse or your wallet was standing on the street corner with your dollar in their hand, you probably wouldn't bother with the controller at all. You'd jump up, march down there, and take your freaking dollar back, because the pain of loss is much stronger than the pleasure of gain. Number two, I also finally found my biggest stick. You've heard people, motivational speakers and the like, tell you to find your why or your reason. And I think that's a great concept. At the same time, though, it's been my experience that people often just kind of phone in the answer with, something obvious but not really emotionally charged. Or they answer with what others expect them to say, like, I want to be around for my kids and my grandkids. I'd never judge someone for their response to this question, because I know for a fact it doesn't come as easy as some may think. It didn't come easy for me. It took a lot. More often than not, a person's first answer isn't the real deep in their heart answer. I thought for years that my why was wanting to be around for my grandkids, which I do. But when I tried to focus on that, it was difficult to feel any real emotion over it. After all, when your grandmother or your grandfather passes away, sure, you miss them, but rarely does it become the hindrance to someone living their best life. Their passing just doesn't have that effect. The fact is, when I'm gone, they will be fine. So want to be around for my grandkids wasn't really my why. It didn't really generate the emotions of fear or desire necessary to consistently motivate me to action. There were no real carrots or sticks there. I was actually hiding from my why. I was afraid to admit it, afraid to face it, afraid to come to grips with it. And you may know you have type 2 diabetes because you have all the symptoms, but you refuse to go to the doctor because you know she'll confirm it. That was a stick I just couldn't face. I didn't want to face it. I didn't want to lose my sight. I didn't want to have my feet amputated or die. And just a little information for you. I'm not saying that your biggest fear should be the same as mine. At the same time, I am saying anyone who doesn't manage their weight needs to be aware of this one big fat stick. According to the CDC, more than 100 million Americans have diabetes or pre-diabetes, and if you are overweight, depending upon your BMI and your demographic, your risk factor is as much as 93 times higher for developing diabetes than that of a healthy person. And we're not talking 93%, we're talking 93 times higher. That's an awfully big stick we should all be aware of. But like I said, we all have different fears and desires. And if the possibility of losing a limb isn't a big enough motivator for you, you need to figure out what is. Take some time for introspection and figure out what your absolute worst weight-related fear is. Maybe it's just dying alone because you think no one you'd be interested in can really love someone who's overweight. Now that's not true, but maybe you fear it anyway because our fears aren't always rational. Maybe you're just embarrassed to be seen in public. I know I was, and I often used that fear as a secondary motivator for me. But find the fear, the weight-related pain that you want most to avoid, and use it as a stick you run away from. Imagine it happening when you go after the snack cakes or whenever you're tempted to just throw in the towel. Concentrate on what will happen if you do and make it as vivid in your mind as possible. That's one of the things I did, and it works. Now, I will have more about using carrots and sticks in future videos, as well as more about the whole psychological thing that we put together. We don't even know what to call it yet. It's just a bunch of things that work. Please like, comment, and share. We'd love to hear from you. I'd love to talk to you. And we certainly do appreciate your support. I'll talk to you soon.